matter how much we may disagree with his rulings. We do not believe that Freddie Gray killed himself. We stand by the medical examiner's determination that Freddie Gray's death was a homicide. However, after much thought and prayer, it has become clear to me that without being able to work with an independent investigatory agency from the very start, without having a say in the election of whether our cases proceed in front of a judge or a jury, without communal oversight of policing in this community, without real substantive reforms to the current criminal justice system, we could try this case 100 times and cases just like it, and we would still end up with the same result.
This was the incident that put an entire city on the edge of a racial explosion. It reverberated throughout the eastern seaboard and became a flashpoint for the entire nation, creating another instance where a good part of America was citing not just a few, but all cops as a reason why racial unrest has become more than the occasional moment of discussion. The death of 25-year-old Freddie Gray while in Baltimore police custody was indeed a moment where how cops handled it needed to be investigated. Not shoving it under the procedural rug, but to dig deep into what actually happened. Allow the judicial system to play its part in keeping the peace, finding out the facts, and keeping a lid on another inner-city cauldron. It should have been investigated in that manner, but it wasn't, because a state's attorney played loose and fast with procedure and her authority, and thus leaves behind questions that could have been investigated properly. And a hard case for those who believe there is an underlying need, by some, to make it all about the cops. Let's hear from you on the subject as well. We'll come to you in mere minutes at 1-877-Newsmax, 1-877-639-7629. Your opinion on what this says about the need for some to always blame cops first and seek excuses for those who might be criminals. This and much more about law enforcement, what the Democrats also really missed in the first 2 days of their convention. Let's welcome back the 30-year veteran at the FBI who knows the how and why of what happens on the ground. Now president of the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund, Ron Hosko. Ron, pleasure to talk to you again, and let's start right out here. Is it not fair to say that Marilyn Mosby, many people simply believe that she is derelict in her duty, that she knee-jerked into these indictments? And yes, you want to find out who the bad cops are, if and where they exist, but she did a disservice to everybody involved by ramming this forward and not having a clear investigation. Yes?
Yes, and I'm one of those people. A prosecutor has a higher duty, and it isn't just, can I get an indictment with mere probable cause, 50.001% of the information. It's, do I have a substantial likelihood of prevailing at trial if I charge now, if I indict? And here, I think the answer is clearly no. Marilyn Mosby was right in some of what she said today. She's right in saying that if she tried this case 100 times, she'd fail 100 times. She would. When you don't have the substantive evidence to prove your allegations, you should fail, and she did fail. She was not 0 for 4 in these cases, dismissing a retrial and 2 new trials. She was 0 for 22. A black former Department of Defense civil rights prosecutor sat as judge, and he systematically dismantled every piece of evidence that she put forward, regarding it as little more than innuendo and supposition. She failed, and that means she failed a year ago. She didn't just fail this week or the last month.
Well, here she is during her press conference wanting to make sure that she tried at least to tamp down the allegations that she is anti-cop. Here's what she said.
Although some have tried to invalidate my family's long-standing service as public officers, I know firsthand the sacrifices, the dedication, the commitment it takes to protect and serve our communities. For those that believe that I'm anti-police, it's simply not the case. I'm anti-police brutality.
Ron, if she does indeed, and she does, her family does have a law enforcement history, if she knows the sacrifice, the dedication, exactly what she said, let's take her at her word, then you've got to proceed more carefully, especially when you are in such a racially charged atmosphere and what this country is going through right now. I mean, look, here's some of the numbers right here. There are more cops right now, according to the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund. The shooting deaths of police are up 78% this year. As somebody who's in charge, you've got to be more sensitive to this.
You need to be more sensitive. You need to be more rational in your decision making. She took a Baltimore Police Department investigation into her own office and within a day turned that into indictments. It clearly was a rush to judgment. It clearly suggests she and her lead prosecutors didn't fully examine the evidence, the witnesses, what they would have hoped to put on the stand. And Ed, good evidence of that is this. A year ago, when this case first blew up, there was a lot of discussion about the knife that the two officers took off of Freddie Gray, whether that was a legal knife in Baltimore or whether that was an illegal knife in Baltimore. We heard comments from Ms. Mosby's office about that as well. Of course, those charges went away. In the trials that I attended, there was never mention of, by her prosecutors, of this being a legal knife, therefore making it an illegal arrest. That went away. Then we heard depraved heart murder against Caesar Goodson. We heard the rough ride theory. There was no evidence of a rough ride. In fact, the evidence turned out to be quite the opposite. These guys, their only theory of the case was the cops are bad, Freddie Gray's a victim, therefore we must go to trial and convict.
I've got about a minute left here. Let me ask you with regard to the Democratic National Convention. They brought up mothers of the movement last night, mothers of those individuals, African-American individuals who have died in police custody. There are some people calling the Democrats tone deaf because while they bring these mothers up, no one deserves to lose a child under any circumstance. People believe they should have also brought up and made note of the families of law enforcement that died. Are they tone deaf? Did they make a mistake here, in your opinion?
100%. The notion that Michael Brown's mother was on that stage, who had a son, understandably died. I understand the pain of a mother and the loss. However, Michael Brown was a store robber and a police attacker. He tried to wrestle with Darren Wilson, a uniformed cop in a marked police vehicle, for Wilson's gun. And when he turned to run, he decided against running, and he turned around and charged that officer.
But fair to say, Ron, and because I'm short on time, I have to interrupt. Fair to say, 43-year-old Eric Garner, 17-year-old Jordan Davis, there were mothers standing there, mothers of individuals who should not have died in police custody, correct?
Absolutely. There are going to be tragic interactions between police and citizens too frequently, until we invest in our cops, until we train everybody the right way, until we lead them the right way, and certainly until we weed out bad cops. They do exist. It used to be my job to find them and indict and convict. So I recognize that that's a reality in America. Somehow we have to come together, and putting up certainly Michael Brown's mother as part of this imagery is a step in the wrong direction, because it recreates the truth and makes it a lie.
I'll agree with you. Stop recreating the truth. Be fair to both sides, because there are stories to be heard on both sides, and that has to be taken into the full concept of when we come to some sort of conclusion as to what needs to be done in this country. That's the big issue here. Ron Hosko, always a pleasure, my friend. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good to be with you.
And now to you, 1-877-Newsmax, your comments on what has happened today in Baltimore, this issue about policing, law enforcement, and the complaint that some people have that, quite frankly, the Democrats are not spending a lot of time worrying about cops. They worry about victims first. 1-877-Newsmax. I only got a couple of minutes. Let's hustle. Nicole from Tucson, Arizona. Nicole, you believe officers in this case had their due process and that more police departments should have body cameras. Well, they are getting more body cameras. But did they have a correct due process as this prosecutor rushed to get it in front of the judge?
No, I really don't think so. I mean, I think a lot of people jump to a lot of conclusions. Yes, as you had mentioned, there were definitely cases where the cops shot before they should have. But there were also cases like the store robber who, the cops were looking for a man and they found him. He was armed, or he tried to reach for an officer's gun.
Talking about Michael Brown in Ferguson.
Yes. And this is just one of those instances that, I feel for the mothers. They've lost somebody.
Absolutely.
They've lost a family member. This is terrible. But families, President Obama should speak up and say for the officers that these men and women, they're brave for going into a situation. They don't know what they're getting into, what's coming ahead of them. They're trying to do the best that they can on a snap decision, and it's just one of those instances. as your friend from the FBI mentioned, that it's going to have tragedy and there's going to be mishaps.
Okay.
Which
I'm out of
doesn't
time,
excuse
unfortunately. I got to move on to another call. Thank you. Please call again. Rich in White Plains, New York. 20 seconds. Prosecutor's incompetent. Why?
Ed, when it comes to justice in this country on the national stage, there's a formula of selective enforcement that's followed. The predominantly liberal media focuses on a story. Politicians feel the subsequent pressure and react to opinion shaped by the media. They appoint a special prosecutor when there is no case, and the taxpayers pay for acquittal after acquittal.
Here's the one thing that I'll agree with you on this right now. People, prosecutors, whomever it is, don't allow yourselves to be fashioned, your opinions to be fashioned by the media. The real legitimate media reports facts. The others just throw opinions out there, and people have to stop taking those as facts as well. Stick around. The Hardline continues.